Okay, the Hangout is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I am Mike Mateen.
And this is Watching 100 Movies. It's a podcast we do sometimes where we're watching our way through the AFI's top 100 movies. Sometimes more quickly than other times, but that's fine because today I just realized this is an older version of the spreadsheet that I linked up. But here's what we're doing. We're today going to be talking about number 34 and number 33 on the list. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, respectively. Now, I believe each of us had both seen both of these. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, had seen both, although it occurred to me as I was getting ready. Yeah, see, I need to pull up another one. There we go. This is the correct version. The version that I first pulled up had the original list correct, but it didn't have it updated with our adjusted rankings all the way correctly. It was an older version of that. I can send you that new link if you need it.
No, I think I have the most updated one.
Okay, well, good. So, anyway, the format of this show is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about one of the movies and then the other of the movies, and then we will decide if we think that it's in the right spot on the list, or if not, we're going to move it to where we think it belongs. Pretty fun. So, what I was just going to say about Snow White before I got distracted by the wrong version of the spreadsheet was that although I had seen it, it occurred to me that I have probably not sat down and watched the whole thing through since I was a kid.
Yeah, I realized the same thing too. Like I've seen scenes from it and clips, but just to sit and watch it, this was a new experience. And I hadn't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in a long time either.
Yeah. I think it had been a while for me, but not like 35 years long. But yeah, so first of all, so one note that I just discovered like literally moments before going into recording here is realizing that the correct spelling is in fact dwarfs with an F, not with a VE. And I realized that only because I read a little trivia thing that specifically addressed how the sort of Tolkien has sort of modernized the way people spell that word, because he spelled it differently in his books. But so even though people more commonly would spell it with a VE today, the original is actually spelled with the F. And I noted that in particular because in all of my little notes about the show, I had been spelling it wrong, or at least not the way the original movie spells it.
Well, and actually, which is the correct grammatical. Before Tolkien, it was dwarves.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. So you might be right. I was going to say what I had read suggested that it's not so much that there's one that is definitively correct as much as it's just which is the commonly accepted spelling.
The way that I had seen it was that dwarfs is the correct one.
Well, certainly the singular is dwarf, and so it's not necessarily obvious why you would put a V in there when you're pluralizing it.
Right. And that Tolkien had two, kind of as a linguistic, not really a trick, but to establish them as more of a race as opposed to an
individual with
within, as opposed to like an individual, he was trying to basically give it a different writing so it didn't sound like the same word as, a human who has dwarfism, but that it's a separate race. So he used little tricks like that with his spelling.
Well, I suppose it works the same way with elf and elves too, right?
Yep.
Well, anyway, I thought that was actually a fairly interesting little miniature discovery that doesn't really have very much to do with the movie itself, except that I just noted that in several places I've spelled it with the more modern accepted version. But I will say, I guess, just because we're kind of dancing around getting into the actual movie, I suppose. I really, really liked it. Rewatching it, I kind of just really found, I kind of expected it to be one of those things where it's like, yeah, product of its time. It's important because it was groundbreaking, and it's fine. But I actually really found myself just really watching it and not distracted by other things.
Yeah, I'll agree that I thought it was good and I wasn't distracted watching it. I did feel that it wasn't as strong as like some of even the other Disney movies because of just from the plot wise, like it's very quick on the plot piece.
Yeah.
But what that allows for is a really rich tapestry of the characters. And I think some of that is part of, I was thinking, I was like, why did they do this? And I think part of it was probably, it was more difficult to animate conversations. So they were only there when 100% necessary. And the rest of it was the more entertaining, like, the cleaning and the singing and the the flies on their noses and, like just these silly little asides that literally don't advance the story, or like them washing up, that takes way longer for them to get washed for dinner than, it does for the prince to arrive, kiss her, and they live happily ever after.
Well, yeah, like I would say the movie's priorities actually seem to be focused on teaching lessons to little kids about doing chores properly and washing your hands before dinner and that sort of thing. Like the movie seems to actually spend a lot more time on that stuff than anything else. I think part of the reason I wasn't distracted is because I was actually live tweeting it as I watched, which helps you stay paying attention, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
But just on the subject of getting right into it, you're absolutely right that like the plot, such as it is just super bare bones. There's not a whole lot to it. You could describe the whole thing in 3 sentences. It's like, and 10 minutes from frame 1, she's already running into the woods.
Yeah.
And so it's really does not waste any time. And I think, there are certainly things about it that show its age. One is just that, especially even though it's a fairy tale, it's an ultra sanitized fairy tale to the point where if you really take even 10 seconds to think about some of it, it really starts feeling pretty bizarre. Like one of my tweets in here was just like an imaginary little conversation of Snow White saying, "Someday my prince will come." Me, "Do you know him well?" "No, I only just met him once and ran away from him like a frightened rabbit, but I think he's the sort who would kiss me while I'm unconscious." Me, "Good luck then." Because it's just seriously like that is the extent of their relationship. And like, this is jumping all the way to the end, but I mean, he does not even hesitate. He walks into frame and just plants one on her immediately. There's not even a, "Oh my gosh, she's so beautiful," lying there. There's nothing. It's just straight to the kiss.
Yes.
You almost can't help but wonder. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, at this point, like they don't believe she's unconscious. They
Yeah.
think she's dead. They built her an above ground coffin, it said, because she was so beautiful in death. Like,
yeah.
And he just rolled up.
Well, that was the whole point. That was the whole thing with the spell, was that it like that was even the evil queen's frustration with it is that it's like it's so close to real death, but oh well, true love's kiss, how's that ever going to happen? And it turns out it's not as hard as you thought. You give her she's hot and has a nice above ground coffin with a glass top. And then again, like this is like all the way at the end. But the last shot, as she rides off Prince Charming's horse, he's guiding her out, a castle appears in the clouds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, is she actually dead? Is this what is this? And I mean, I know that I don't think that's what they're really trying to show, but like the castle appears in the clouds. It's not on the horizon. It is in the sky.
Yeah, I took that as like it was in the fog, but it was in the clouds. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I took a screenshot of it because it's notably in the clouds. It's like very clear. Like, I mean, it's you know, like obviously they're going for an artistic thing here, and it's fine. I don't want to like harp too much on it exactly, except that it just made me laugh because of how goofy any of that part of the story is. If you think about it for even 10 seconds, it's like the end of Grease when the car flies up into the sky. You know, it's just like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But I will say that, like, although obviously
I'm looking at it, I took it that it was up in the mountains, like, and the fog is in the valley in between them. Not that it was literally in the clouds, but like you said, it's
well, briefly, just because we're talking about it, let me I can pull up my screenshot of it. So oh yeah, that's not but yeah, see, that's this is the actual shot of it, and it's like, you might be kind of, I mean, you know, like you could be right, but boy, it's sure way up there.
no, it is. I'm just saying that's how I'm not trying to argue that's what that's how
I know. And I'm not really arguing that it means anything, that it looks like it's in the sky. It's more just a matter of
right, kind of catches you off guard, like,
yeah, it just especially because obviously that the whole love story part of this story is kind of goofy. That just the sudden thought of like, wait, is she actually dead? Is this a Jacob's Ladder scenario, or like what's going on? You know, like she's actually yeah. Like this is Pan's Labyrinth is actually what it made me think of at the time. Where, you know, the girl like she gets heaven because she actually died, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, still, it's true that the extent of her knowledge of Prince Charming before the kiss at the end is a moment where she's singing, he starts singing with her, and she runs away scared. That is the only time they've ever met before.
yes.
So the fact that, you know, that just puts an extra edge on the fact that he just walks up and kisses this dead girl in the middle of the woods. But that said, we could also almost take it as the other way and say the fact that he does not even hesitate or even look around or anything. Maybe it's just a scene that we didn't see where he's been informed how the whole thing works. And so he knows what he's doing. It's not like he didn't expect her to wake up, because in the moment, obviously it's being played for, you know, mythic weight, right? Not for realism, but he doesn't seem surprised that she wakes up.
No, that's true. And there are obviously a lot of other places where they've shortcutted out relationships. Like the Queen obviously knew who she was, and, you know, and they had some sort of history together, but they didn't, like, they never interact in the whole movie other than when she's bring her the apple. But the whole first 10 minutes, like you said, of the movie is the Queen asking who's the fairest of them all, and Snow White has clearly like been around for a while.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think that this is where it gets into the whole detail of like, well, probably the answer is, I mean, we see Snow White, although she's dressed simply, we see her essentially like at the castle. So she's like a maid or something, right? Like, so it's not, but it's not made clear, and ultimately it doesn't really matter, except that we can kind of talk about it. But I'm just suddenly got excited thinking about after the evil queen's death, when, you know, for all anybody else knows, the actual queen has just gone missing. And then like there's a whole CSI where they find her secret lab and read the book, and like that's how they find out. And then the Prince Charming, like, he knows all about it, so that's why he's going there to wake her up on purpose. and we could have the whole montage of him falling in love with her by studying all she's done since then. I don't know. I'm kind of making all that up, but it's kind of fun to think about because the movie doesn't give us very much.
No.
One of the things that I guess I found myself a little bit surprised by is that maybe because in my head, old Disney movies meant like Sword in the Stone, 101 Dalmatians, Robin Hood, and some of those. And like those are kind of like that was in my head. And those are some of the ones where, as much as I love those movies, the animation is not as good. It's cheaper. They take a lot of shortcuts, right? Yeah. Whereas in this, it's gorgeous. It's every, like, from, I think maybe just because it was like the first animated feature, although looking at the IMDb trivia suggests there were actually a couple of others that were less well known and not preserved. But in any event, it was certainly a big deal when it came out. It was a prestige piece. People thought he was crazy. And so like they did not skimp on the animation.
No, and I think that's also part of what I believe is why some of the plot gets shortcut. I think I kind of touched on it at the beginning. In order to preserve that beauty in that animation at the time, too much dialogue would have been clunky for them. They couldn't animate like that. And even if you watch like some of the times they're taught, like their mouths don't, like, you could not. Some of it is even a little clunky now, but because they framed it within these larger, you know, and a lot of it happens off screen, which you don't realize. You know, it'll be like Dopey playing around and Doc talking, and kind of Doc at the end of his speaking. This is just like stuff I noticed. Like, yeah, they definitely talk, but they wanted complex character interaction and dialogue was not going to be strong and still preserve the beauty of how the movie looked. So
that's interesting. I didn't notice that at all. Maybe it was just that like the little tricks they were using for that kind of just worked on me, and I kind of just noticed where it was working, and they successfully led my eye away from where it might not have worked as well. I mean, I was just thinking about like you know, just lots of little charming little grace notes and just detail everywhere in all of the backgrounds and everything. And, you know, like all the little bits, like the frequently parodied because it's legitimately amazing whistle while you work sequence, right? I mean, it's iconic. Like that's the reason there's been so many parodies of it, including the also amazing one from Enchanted. I don't remember. Did you see that one?
Yes.
Yeah. That's for anyone who hasn't seen Enchanted, that's the one where live action princess played by Amy Adams is in real New York. And so when she calls out to have forest creatures help her clean, it's all like pigeons and rats and cockroaches and flies and stuff, but they still help her clean up the apartment. But like that sequence is amazing, and it's full of all of these little notes, like how the animals keep trying to cheat the chores, like just sweeping dust under the rug or licking the dishes clean instead of washing them properly. But she's just very cheerfully, gently encouraging them to do it properly. And it's just all those funny little bits. Kind of related to that, it was also a really charming moment when the forest kind of does its own face turn, to use a narrative wrestling term, of where it seems scary because she's scared running through it. But then after she kind of collapses and starts to calm down a little bit, it's the whole scenery just kind of warms up and all the little animals start seeing her and coming out, and just that transition is really very charming.
Yes, I thought that was great, where some of the eyes in the trees turn out to really just be like the robins, you know, and the squirrels, as opposed to like monsters, you know.
It's really pretty good, and there is actually I read on the IMDb that they wrote 25 songs and only 8 of them stayed in the movie. And I'm sure that they had just tons of material that they kind of sort of were trying to work out, and what they left in was the stuff that really worked, and that they could make work. But I thought that, as simple as the story is, the writing's pretty good. You know what I mean? For having 7 dwarfs, they're distinctive. Like, we know which one we're looking at when it's on screen, and they act different and they speak different, and they are meaningfully different characters, despite the fact that from a story perspective, they could be interchangeable.
Yep.
So that's pretty well executed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of what made the story so relatable, because they're not kids, but she kind of treats them like kids and is, always assuming they were kids. They are essentially the kids. There are as a kid that there are representative in the story.
Yeah, no, definitely. They really are treated like children. One of the in particular, one of the moments that made me think of that was Snow White's reaction to Grumpy's grumpiness is so condescending that it just couldn't help but make me think of responding to internet trolls and stuff, just in the sense of where everyone else is like, they're all surprised to have found her, and that she's kind of guessing each of their names by just by looking at them, essentially, and then he's all stern and she's just like, oh, serious, and it's like she does not take him seriously at all, and she is amused by his anger. And I think it's just the fact that she does not at any point give him any actual take any actual offense or feeling about that emotion. It's just basically like, oh, I get it. You're named Grumpy, so that just means I don't have to take any of this personally. I'm just like, nope. and sure, I mean, and I just thought that was kind of amusing, and there's some pretty good, just on that sort of thought process of it. One of my tweets was the quote from where he's Grumpy is like, she's a female, and all females is cursed. They're full of wicked wiles. Bashful is like, what are wicked wiles? I don't know, but I'm agin them.
I thought you said I was against him.
Well, he did, but he just again them.
Oh,
yeah. He said it in sort of the dialect way.
Yeah,
I'm agin them, as opposed to I'm a get them or something. But yeah, in any event, it's that's. I mean, there's some clever dialogue there, even though for the most part, the dialogue really only serves characterization purpose, because most of the movie's runtime, as you said, is not really even that concerned with the main conflict of the plot. We spend a lot of time on cleaning up the house, meeting the dwarves, having them wash up for dinner, having dinner, singing and dancing. Yep. And that's about 2/3 of the movie.
There's that extremely long, going to bed scene. You know, the fly keeps landing on the different dwarves, and antagonizing them, and yeah, they're snoring, and it's
Mhm.
just there's so much of that, and
Yeah. No.
it's fun.
Yeah,
But
like it's not boring. It's like I was enjoying kind of every moment of that, you know, and honestly, I was not really necessarily in a hurry to have it get back to the main plot because for that matter, I mean, the main plot's not that special really.
right.
Now, what I will say, Evil Queen is pretty awesome. For how little screen time she actually has, she's pretty memorable.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like obviously she's the villain, but at the same time, you know, like she definitely got like a sense of style in either role, right? You know, like even, you know, she got her, you know, regal ice queen sort of look, but then like when she decides to go in disguise, she does not take shortcuts. Like she and one of the moments that really just made me laugh was how she's got this whole plan, right? She has disguised herself to the point of being completely unrecognizable. She's created this poisoned apple. She has this plan of going in and finding her when the dwarves are away at work. She's got all of this worked out. She is leaving the castle through the secret passage in the dungeon. And she takes time out of her plan to randomly taunt a skeleton in the dungeon. And it's just like, yep, that's just who she is. You know, it's like,
The Evil Queen.
oh look, here's this dead skeleton reaching for water. I think it's funny to pretend that now I'm giving it to him. It's just like, all right. And there's the fun business with the vultures, right? Where, you know, they're used really effectively to suggest that death is near and make it, you know, like we're afraid for Snow White. But then, of course, at the end, when Witch falls off the mountain, the vultures follow her down, right? You know, they are the opportunists. They're not really on her side. Here's a question I wanted to ask how you felt about it. Obviously, Snow White, despite having been explicitly warned by the dwarves not to let anyone in because we know that the evil queen is trying to find and kill you. So don't let anyone in. And then when this old lady shows up, even then the animals try to warn her too, but she still takes a bite of the apple. How did you feel about how all that went down?
I mean, it's yes, she gets warned a lot, but they do play it while it's not 100% convincing. Like you at least understand why she went ahead and did it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the costume was convincing enough, the scenario was convincing enough that she thought that this couldn't be what they're talking about. Like this is just some old lady selling apples. Like it's fun, you know. And she doesn't ignore them, but she sort of dismisses them with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad that was your take too, because I sort of found myself thinking kind of the same thing, which was that she does not come across as like naive and stupid falling for a dumb trick. It feels like she's just that kind and trusting
Yeah.
and fell for a good trick. You know, like the evil queen put the work in to make it convincing.
Right.
And and took advantage of Snow White's good nature. It wasn't just that she was naive and made a stupid mistake. That's kind of how it felt to me. And I was sort of surprised to feel that way because I guess in my head, I hadn't been thinking of it that way. I had always remembered that sequence feeling a little bit more like the silliness of her being in true love with the one guy she ran away from once.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, but yeah, it's the scene really sells itself. Like, you know, the evil queen is in character and looks, convincing. And it is, it feels like Snow White is the one who is not superficial and is able to be kind to someone even if they don't look pretty. So, just happens to be that she is actually wrong in this case, but so in some ways the lesson of that whole little episode is that you should trust your friends that tell you not to be nice to old ladies. I don't know. But again, like, it doesn't really come across that way. It almost, it's, the evil queen is really a true villain in the sense that, she's doing bad things for bad reasons and taking advantage of things that are actually good things. It's bad things happen because she's a bad person, not because anyone else did anything wrong.
Right.
I kind of like that. It's very basic. It's obviously a very simple, fairy tale being told for children. It's super sanitized even compared to, like the original Snow White story is pretty different. But yeah, there's, I don't know, lots of good stuff in there. Trying to think, obviously there's a whole lot of stuff that's just about the dwarves and Snow White being kind of charming with each other. And I don't know that we need to just like step by step through those. But did you have anything else about Snow White, or?
No, that was just my general take on it. It was entertaining, but a little weak on plot, which, I get why it's the only Disney on here, correct?
I believe the only Disney animated one. I'm not sure what else.
They're just scrolling through it.
Yeah, I think it may be. And certainly we can understand why maybe it would be the one, just especially given that, it kind of do everything that it started, right?
Right.
Obviously Disney was big enough to have gotten it made at the time, so it's not like Disney was nothing before this, but still, Disney's bigger now than it was.
Yep. So yeah, it's hard because I get why it's on here.
Toy Story, I guess, is kind of Disney.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
There are other ones that I like better than this still.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I would definitely agree with that.
But it's hard to, I don't want to punish this one on the list because it's not like there's another one that I wouldn't move another one in its place, because that's part of what we're getting into in this part of the list is not only are these going to be good movies, but they are going to have made some sort of mark, and you can't,
right.
You don't want to extract that from why the movie's in its place. So that's just made for a tricky, like, what do I do with it, So
yeah, no, it's the same. Yeah, I think the fact that the two that are on here, the two animated movies that are on here, are the first 2D animated feature, and then Toy Story. I don't recall if it was the first, CGI animated feature, but it was certainly like the biggest first one,
Right.
So like, I think it's not a coincidence that those are the two, right? Because it's kind of, their presence on the list is almost more about their impact than the movie itself, although the movies aren't bad.
Right.
But yeah, it's I think I would agree. There are certainly other animated movies, other Disney animated movies that I would rank higher in terms of my personal enjoyment, but you can't totally rule out the fact that it had this amazing influence because, this was a movie that, people thought Walt Disney was crazy when he was making it. It was sort of the Waterworld of the day in the sense, except that when it came out, it was actually really good. And it got an honorary award at the Oscars where they made one full-size statuette and then 7 little ones.
Yep.
And according to the IMDb awards page here, it says the winner honorary award for Walt Disney for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, recognized as a significant screen innovation which has charmed millions and pioneered a great new entertainment field. And that was in 1939.
Yeah. So the fact that all the other ones that we've gotten to enjoy are because they did such a good job with this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was proof of concept. It launched a medium. Like, you know, short cartoons had existed, but this showed that it could be more.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that is important, that when considering where it goes on the list. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I can't remember. Have we in the past gone ahead and ranked each one as we do it, or did we rank the two of them at the end? I kind of feel like it was the latter,
but I think I think we've done it both ways, but I think we typically have waited till the end and done both at the same time.
That makes a little bit more sense to me. But in the meantime, I guess, do you want to go ahead and move on to
the
next one then? All right. So our next movie, number 33, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. With Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher, directed by Milos Forman in 1975, won a whole bunch of awards.
Yep.
Let me just pull that up. So it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Yep. But then it was also nominated for
top 5, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And then also nominated on top of that for Best Supporting Actor for Brad Dourif, who I had totally forgotten that's who that was, because I've loved him in other things since, and I had not until watching it this time ever drawn a connection between him in this, because like his sort of more modern presentation is so different from his character in this.
Right.
Yeah. But so Best Supporting Actor, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, and Best Music Original Dramatic Score was nominated for. Also won a bunch of Golden Globes and BAFTA awards and so on and so forth. Tons of stuff. Lots of awards. You talk about it first.
Wow. I mean, you sounded like you had something you wanted to say.
No, I guess I felt like I had some mixed feelings about it. Like, it's obviously does a lot that's really good. And I guess I wanted to not jump off or lead off with that sort of ambivalence a little bit. But I mean,
I think it's really good. So,
well, I mean, so let me certainly qualify any reservation that I might have and say it's a very good movie. No question about it. But there's some stuff about it that watching it this time, I kind of felt a little, I don't know. I had some complicated feelings that I wasn't 100% sure what was going on with that. And so that's kind of why I was sort of stopped myself, because I wasn't really sure what I was going to say exactly.
So, well, I think one of the things that's important with this movie is on here for not just being, and it won all those awards also not for just being a good movie, but for exposing something and bringing it to the public, something that people didn't really want to talk about that existed in our society. And that was basically abuses of power in mental health facilities to not actually get people better, because that kept people in power. And that was a thing that was happening. And it was, and could even extend, as it ends in this film, to the point where people could even get lobotomized, which is essentially killing them. Even though they stay alive, like they are vegetative, and that's not a life. And it's more about controlling them than fixing them. And that was a rampant under the rug problem that was happening in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that this movie just blew open by doing it in such a good job. Well, and to be fair, the book is actually excellent as well.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things that I remember the first time I watched this movie is I had read the book first, and I was going to watch the movie adaptation of it, and I was like, I didn't expect it to be able to be true to the book, because the book is actually narrated by the chief.
Hmm.
He tells the whole story, and so I was like, this is going to be very difficult for it to match. It is one of the truest adaptations that I've ever seen, while still maintaining the difference in the mediums. That really, really impressed me, because there's really only one piece that they kind of took out, which was and it actually made the movie better. There was another character that died earlier, and another character that got lobotomized earlier, which was just kind of to lead you to see how this stuff could happen, so that at the end, in the book, it actually works better, because when our two of our main characters die and get lobotomized, in the book, it's more powerful because you know this is a thing. There's this impending doom that this could happen. Whereas in the movie, they take it the other way, where you're actually not expecting this to be an actual outcome, and then it delivers it like 1-2 on you, and just and just opens your eyes to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, the fact that they removed that thread actually worked really well in the transition, and they didn't, and the whole having the chief narrate it, like that's not missing because of the way that the story is told so well and it's pieced together well. You don't need the narrator, and some of the, there's some use of language, and not bad language, but like how he speaks and narrates, and how he's kind of crafted the world. Mm-hmm. That he doesn't call it the asylum, he calls it the combine, because they're basically these cogs in this machine, and this kind of stuff. There's little things like that actually made the book really good, but none of that's lost when you translate it over into the film. And that's where that's one of the reasons I like this movie so much, is that book was really powerful to me. And then to see it translated so well. And then again, it's where it stood. This movie and this book were instrumental in opening a door on something that people didn't want to talk about, and people didn't know if they did know, they didn't want to talk about it. And, this is part of the 50s that was supposedly, it was all Mary Tyler Moore and Dick Van Dyke. Like, this was happening. And so I like all of those things. And I thought, the characters in it are great. I think that Louise Fletcher does a phenomenal job of basically being this absolute, like, power control bully, but delivering it with such a way that she sounds like you want to be empathetic to her side, but there is nothing to be empathetic about her.
Well, you could totally see how she gets away with all that.
Right.
She says the right things when she's talking to the people in charge.
Yeah, and like there's a scene where she says, like, "Oh, I think we should leave him here with us for a little while.
I think we can help him.
I think we can help him." And really, she's like, "I want him under my control, under my power. I'm going to break him like he tried to break me."
Yeah.
But she delivers it, and you almost like, "Oh yeah, no, she does." Wait, you almost got me, and I'm in the audience.
Yeah. I'll definitely, like, as I'm listening to you talk about this, like, again, it's like I'm sort of trying to pour over my feelings and kind of try to say, like, what is it that I'm kind of reacting to? Because, like, everything you're saying is like, yeah, no, I agree. All of that's really good. And so I'm kind of just trying to, like, what is kind of holding me back from just being enthusiastic about it? And I'm not sure. It's a complicated, obviously it's a difficult movie, right? It's not, there's parts of it that are fun, but obviously, ultimately, the end result, like, even though, like, Chief is able to run away at the end, it's not, it's a very bittersweet at best ending, right? We've lost, I don't know. I think one of the things that I was thinking about as I watched it is that, as bad as some of the abuses were and, are as depicted in the movie, and I think one of the things that I was thinking about is how, in some ways, psychiatric care in America has almost swung too far in the other direction, because there was, like, for example, while there are certainly, you know, like, there were historically all sorts of terrible abuses at some of these psychiatric hospitals, there was also a lot of like, politically in the United States, kind of the government saying, you know what, we kind of just don't want to pay for these hospitals anymore. And so all these people who really can't take care of themselves are just turned out onto the street, and now they're homeless. And too bad for them. And so I think maybe I was thinking about that a little bit. And it's not like I was saying, you know, like, oh, well, this, you know, this hospital, as we see in the movie, is the better alternative to that. It's more just a matter of maybe just feeling sad that it's not something we have a better solution for is in this world.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is one of the things. That's one of the things that makes me. I mean, it's not an easy movie. Like, it's not meant to be comfortable watching.
Yeah.
And even given the context of what you said, like, they didn't know that watching at the time, but now looking at it, whatever, 30, 40 years later, maybe even 50 at this point.
Well, 1975 is when the movie came out.
Was that 40 plus years later? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That, you know, we have that context of what it, you know, like you said, it maybe has swung so far in the other direction, in that, you know, we don't have hospitals, we can't hold people. Mm-hmm. You know,
I mean, there obviously psychiatric hospitals do still exist. I mean, there are places, but a lot of them closed it down, and there's a lot less capacity for that sort of thing.
Right, and which has led to people being, you know, not every homeless person would have been in a psychiatric hospital,
right,
and vice versa, but it is a part of that. Part of that problem. And mm-hmm. So, like I said, you look at it with this context, and that makes it complicated. You know, the movie is deliberately told. I mean, the book is the same way too, and actually probably even more overt in this. You know, he's this martyr or this messiah to them, basically. You know, to help free them, which also. Mm-hmm. But that leads to, you know, that has a whole bunch of complex feelings around it too, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, like, because he is, Jack Nicholson's character, not really a good guy. No. You know, like, he's not a monster, but he's certainly selfish, impulsive, right? And it's really kind of like, you know, like that whole thing where he decides to take everyone on a boat trip, which I think maybe if I was going to point to one part of the movie where I actually think that, like, I'm not sure it belongs with the rest of it, is maybe the length of that boat trip. I don't know. It feels like a different movie. But anyway, but why did he do that? Right. I don't think it really was for them entirely. Like, it's all kind of a muddle, right? I don't want to be too critical of him, because it's like, but the point is, like, he could have just escaped. Right. But that's not what he wanted, because he didn't want to be a fugitive. He wanted to not be sent back to the regular prison.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so he had to do something that would seem crazy.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, the fishing trip, and I think honestly, which again, part of what you're bringing up is part of what makes that allegory, like, he's not meant to be like Jesus Christ. Like, it's right, not. Yeah. That isn't what it's trying to say, but it uses enough symbolism to draw this, like, again, this martyr messiah property to him, of like how he basically come in, and these guys who were all cowed and beaten down by the system were now able to start to open their eyes and realize they're empowered, and that's, you know, culminated in Chief running away. Yeah. But they took, I think, because he's not a good guy, like, I think that's part of why in the movie, which was going to hit a broader audience, and the book was, had a lot of, was banned a lot of places. And I think this is part of it. Why is because he's not a good guy, but he's drawn with these symbolism things. And I think if you take that leap and you don't want to, it can be very, very uncomfortable for you to say, well, wait, they're saying that Jesus was as bad, was like this. And it's like, no, they're saying that those, they're just trying to make the point. And that's why the fishing trip is in there. Like in the book, there are actually 12 of the patients that hang around with him, as opposed to, and they almost make it very clear that there aren't in the movie.
Okay, yeah.
Some of that's a little, because they do the vote.
Okay, see, because I was actually that's what I was gonna ask a little bit, just because although in some ways there's elements of the allegory in the movie, I didn't think of it as really that strong. Like it's kind of there, but only in the sense of like he kind of helps them and then pays the price for it, as opposed to making it more explicit. But like making it like, oh yeah, he has 12 disciples, that sort of thing in the book, that seems more explicit.
Yes, it's much more overt in the book. It does
overt. That's better.
Yeah, it's explicit, overt, whatever. It essentially compares, the electroshock therapy to a crown of thorns. That's one of the things that they're imposing on him. Because and so it's symbolic, but it's also like makes sense with the allegory. Like it's actually really well done. Yeah. And like to your point, they did, and like I said, I feel like they explicitly removed that. So yes, it's still told the same story of a guy who comes in and helps these guys at the expense of himself, even if it's accidentally or, well, by the end it's his choice. He knows what's going to happen, even though he sort of expected to get away. Like he almost,
well, he basically, it seemed like the crucial moment, right? When he was about to climb out the window and then essentially decided to talk the girl into sleeping with Billy instead. Right. Or at least first. But he kind of plays it like he thought this will take 15 minutes and then I'm leaving.
Right.
But then he passes out and wakes up on the floor in the morning.
Yeah. But then he sticks around, sees what happens, and then slowly opens the window. It's not really in a huge rush. He had plenty of opportunity to have left had he really wanted to. But again, and then when the girl screams when Billy kills himself, he had an opportunity there where they could have, had they just wanted to leave, because everybody left and they were left there with the open window. And that's when he decided to go and show that they weren't going to take this anymore. He had and it's done. That part's very deliberate in the movie. I mean, I don't even get where his, once he's had sex with a girl and he has a little bit of confidence, like it's not about the sex, it's the confidence that he gets.
Right. Yeah. It's the idea that he stands up to her, that she's like, no, I need to destroy him. And it just makes it just lays it completely bare that she has no interest in actually helping him. It's all about control. Not that we doubted it before, but it's just so transparent in that moment when we see him owning his own actions for the first time.
And it's even done with, he has no stutter.
Right.
He's able to speak articulately and clearly and say, no, I'm not going to do
an adult and not a child. And and for her to see that happening and try to force him to retreat back into, the uncertainty and the fear, it's monstrous. Yeah. And so I'll echo too, like what you were saying earlier about just Louise Fletcher playing Nurse Ratched is an astounding antagonist in this movie, right? Like she's as much of a villain as the evil queen, right? I mean, she is a fascinating villain because she's just so different from what we sort of, you know, think of most movie villains being. Like, you know, she is, generally speaking, soft-spoken, calm. You know, she is in a role where theoretically she's helping people, but it's just sort of, you have to be able to read between the lines over time to recognize how much of what she's doing is just because she gets off on the power trip of saying, I am in control of these people. They have to do what I say. And I can rationalize even to myself that it's for their own good that I keep them under such tight control. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves if I let them do whatever they wanted. I have to control them because I know best. And anytime that's questioned at all, it must be destroyed because it would break her rationalization to allow them to try controlling their own actions and maybe succeeding.
Well, yeah, and up until that last scene where she finally like breaks and she becomes even so monstrous, she's so smooth with it, like the voting on being able to watch the World Series.
Oh
game.
yeah,
because she knows that she's got control of them, so they're never going to vote for it the first day.
Right.
And then, you know, by Jack Nicholson's character making the effort of how he's going to escape by ripping up like the hydro thing, you know, the concrete like brick hydrotherapy thing, like in the shower. Right. And he can't do it, obviously. And
well, that's a weird moment in the movie too, just because it's one thing to imagine in the book, I guess, just when you, because isn't the character like a big guy in the book?
Who?
McMurphy.
I don't recall it being anything more.
I think I read somewhere that in the book that he's supposed to be like a big Irishman or something like that. But I don't
remember it being critical to the story one way or the other.
Well, okay, so I don't know that it matters as much as just it's one thing to imagine, but like I think as depicted on screen, watching Jack Nicholson try to pick up that thing, it's just one of those things where it seems stupid to even attempt. It's just like, of course you can't do that. That's ridiculous. You know, you might as well try to, you know, punch your way through that cinder block wall. I mean, it's not going to happen. What are you doing?
Right.
So I guess that's, you know, it's like I said, I just mean this, like, that seems like a plot point where sort of as depicted on screen, it feels a little bit different than I think the intent is, because it's one thing for him to kind of just sort of be out of control and willing to try an unreasonable thing. But like, that seems like a just sort of obviously impossible thing. Now, that said, the payoff when Chief does it at the end is great, right? But it also just kind of doesn't really make sense what he's actually trying to do in that first scene, right? Like, because he really sort of plays it off like he thinks he might be able to do it, but that's so clearly an insane thing to try.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's trying to show them that he's willing to try anything. Like, he's willing to go through things, you know, that he's not all talk. Like, he's going to give it his best shot, even if it seems impossible. And so that they see that, well, maybe we should try something, even if we feel like it's impossible. Yeah. Like what he's trying to draw, again, it's obviously he's not thinking of this complex, and it's meant to be more, you know, is that, okay, well, you guys think that standing up to the nurse is equally as impossible as me lifting this thing, but I'm going to try anyway. So you should try anyway. And you can expect that it's going to be the same result of it's not going to work, but, you know, try like I tried, you know, instead of saying
something,
right. Instead of saying,
doing nothing,
stand up and be successful. Right. He's like, just try, even if it isn't successful. What does it matter? You know?
Yeah. Like, to try and fail is better than to not try, because if you don't try, then you're still in the same situation anyway.
Right. If you don't like your situation, but you're scared that if you try to change it, it's not going to change, why not try and just see? As basically, and that's why he's able to get them to vote. But then where I was originally going with that is like the pivot from once she realizes she's going to lose the vote,
right,
smoothly being like, well, this isn't the majority of the floor. Of course, everyone has to vote because everyone's on the floor. And to deliver it with such calmness, like, of course, this was always the way that it was.
right.
When he knows that she changed the game.
Yeah, like you can. It's such great performance from both of them there, where they just have that meaning of the minds, where he realizes, oh, I see. There's no reasoning.
They have no interest in letting us vote or watch.
Yeah.
Whatever.
There is no actual conversation happening here. This is you keeping everybody down no matter what. It's not, so there's no rational argument that's going to persuade you because you are not approaching this from a perspective of treating us like human beings. And it is, and that's, of course, like what, that's where he finally is willing later to try to say something against her, even is kind of a low key way to put it, but like she ain't honest. She likes a rigged game. It's kind of all he really says, but to say it in that context is important because his whole thing kind of up to that point had been, this is better than prison. I want to be here. Even though I'm kind of also pretending like I don't think I should be here because that's what someone who belongs here would say, right? Because that whole thing. But like when he is so honest by being unable to not say something against her, that's where he kind of lets his guard down there. You know what I mean? Like he's kind of like actually asking for real help there. But he kind of doesn't really know how to do it because, even if he isn't, crazy or, insane in the like traditional way, like he's got his own deficits in terms of healthy life skills. Yes. Right. I mean, he did get himself put in prison and, it's like, although it was statutory rape this time, that wasn't the first time. Yeah, like that moment I think is really interesting because even though it kind of in another context could come across as such a kind of a weak sauce complaint compared to what she's really doing, the fact that he would, even in a sort of tentative way, try to appeal to an actual authority that might be able to do something about her is kind of a cry for help for him, right? And it's not even just for him. It's because it's like he doesn't feel victimized. It is not just that he wants to watch the game. It's that he convinced everybody else to also be excited, and she's still keeping them down. So it's not even just about hurting him. It's about everybody. And that's kind of where it changes for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think... Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The other part where it changes for him is when the orderly lets him know that he's not just serving the same amount of jail time, that he now has to be decommitted. Right. And he realized that everything that he'd been doing up to this point had been actually actively working against him getting out.
Right. Well, and I think, yeah, so like that's one of those things too where it leads to a really interesting sequence with him and the other patients too, where like he engages in that group therapy session with like a real issue and a real concern in having an actual discussion in a group therapy setting, oddly enough. But it just in that whole sequence of him kind of talking to them, kind of feeling like, I was really starting to think of you guys as my friends, but how could you let me do this if you're my friends? But then for them to kind of, for that the reveal of the mutual misunderstanding there, where they're like, we just assumed you knew that.
Yeah, like
It's not. We're not in the same situation.
That's not a thing for any of us. Yeah, we could leave whenever we want.
Yeah. And yes, what you were doing seemed like it was likely to have a bad outcome, but guess what? A lot of the people in here don't exactly do what's in their best interest all the time.
Yeah. And it was a lot of fun doing that stuff with you.
Yeah. And so it's kind of this interesting moment of vulnerability and kind of real growth and therapy with his fellow inmates, kind of despite the fact that Nurse Ratched is sitting right there.
Yeah.
Well,
I love that that's where he went with that decision point, because I think part of the intention of the orderly was to basically like cow him down, because they just beat him in the basketball game, and he was trying to be like, oh no, telling him like, oh no, this is why you need to be submissive to us, is because otherwise you're never getting out of here. And instead of just going and trying to be submissive and placate them, he just goes and calls everybody and says, why didn't anybody tell me this was the case?
Right.
Here? And has a real, like you said, a real therapy session that she has no control over.
And in fact, I mean, am I misremembering that that's the one that ends up degenerating because Cheswick insists on his cigarettes? And
because once he's realized he's supposed to be able to do whatever he wants, he decided he wants his cigarettes not rationed. He tells him that, well, no, they're rationed because you're gambling away. And then I forget whose line it was where they said, but if we don't get our cigarettes, how are we supposed to win our money back?
Yeah. Because that's her stated reason for why they don't get to just have their cigarettes.
Because they've lost too much.
Because you lost them all in gambling. But then how are we supposed to get our money? Yeah. I think, for one, just as a side comment, I think the more we've talked about it, a lot of that ambivalent feeling I had is kind of fading. And I think maybe what that reaction was is just really that the movie made me feel sad.
Yeah.
I think that might have been really all it was, as opposed to any fault in the movie. But in any event, it just, all of that scene and the way it degenerates and everything. I mean, obviously it's so sad because we feel so bad for Cheswick there, because in a lot of ways he's making a fairly reasonable request. And yet we see, just like how, McMurphy was talking about how you guys let me do something that was bad for me. We can see that as much as we might agree with Cheswick that he should be able to have his cigarettes, we can see that him starting to freak out about it is just going to be bad. Yep. And we wish we could tell him to calm down, because you're not only not going to get your cigarettes, but you're going to get something worse. And it's hard. But then it also leads to the reveal that Chief can talk. That, him and McMurphy sitting on that bench and the gum, and just that whole moment is just amazing, of just casually lets it, juicy fruit. And it's just like, what? That's amazing, an amazing moment. I mean, obviously when you've seen it before, you kind of know it's coming, but it's still a great moment.
It is a good moment.
Yeah. One of the classic reveals. Actually, that's just got me thinking about some other, like best movie reveals. I don't know. And like The Third Man, where we finally realize Harry Lime's alive. The end of Usual Suspects, where we reveal the whole, like the bulletin board thing and the mug and all that stuff. I don't know. That's kind of off the subject a little bit, maybe, but it's certainly just in terms of a revelation that's just this perfect crystal moment in the movie. That's because it breaks the tension. It's a sort of a tiny little island of happiness in otherwise sad scenes around it.
Yep, I agree.
It's great. We haven't really talked about the rest of the cast very much. It's interesting to see Danny DeVito and Christopher Lloyd so young in it. I mean, Christopher Lloyd is pretty, like, yeah, that's obviously him, right? It's like well, yes, definitely. That is absolutely him. Whereas Danny DeVito, I feel like, is almost a little more unrecognizable. Maybe partly just because he's not speaking in the voice that we kind of have come to think of as the Danny DeVito voice.
Yeah, and he has a full head of hair, and he's skinnier, but he's still really short.
Yeah.
But because it almost looks odd, more odd than normal, because like he's made his whole personality kind of odd. So the shortness is sort of a part of that, where in this he looks normal outside of being really short. You know.
Right. Well, and I mean, like, you know, Taxi was not that long after this, right? And that's sort of like when Danny DeVito was young, you think of him in Taxi, and he's still like the Danny DeVito that we think of now, only younger. Whereas this feels like he's playing a different character. He's not playing Danny DeVito.
Right. And when that's what he's basically like, that Taxi character has essentially become his persona through a lot of, like,
it's the movie star versus actor,
right,
distinction, right? He's kind of discovered that he is really good at playing that particular kind of abrasive character, and he's not doing that in this one. He's playing a very different kind of character, and he does great, but it's just interesting how it makes him so much less recognizable.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the the other patients are interesting too. Like I'm forgetting the character's name, but like the smart guy with the mustache.
Oh, it's like Hendrix or Henderson, something like that.
Yeah, I'm like looking at the one of the weird things that the IMDb does lately is it sometimes the list of, when you look at the cast list, it's in a just strange order sometimes. Like the first two listed people in the cast here are Michael Berryman as Ellis and Peter Bracco as Colonel Matterson. And it's like, okay, like, is that Jack Nicholson is literally not on this list of the first 15. You have to see full cast. So I don't know how they do that order, but yeah. So in any case, that just makes me think of Scatman Crothers as Turkle. What a bad day that guy has. Not that he doesn't deserve it. I mean, like, he did everything that, like he's the one that allowed that all to happen. Like, he's the one that is actually a night orderly at a psychiatric hospital. He kind of should know better, but he allowed himself to be bribed and then got drunk, and then all sorts of bad stuff happened. But boy, by the end of that, you just sort of feel like, why did he even stay the night? Like, at a certain point when you realize, no, I'm definitely going to get fired. It's like, well, do you even really stay until the morning to get yelled at? I mean, at a certain point, it's kind of like, maybe it would be just better to just not show up, not be there in the morning.
Right.
Because the solution that he comes up with is to get stinking drunken to be found passed out. So doesn't really seem like a better option. I mean, it would be one thing to say, like, once he realized how bad it had gone, like, maybe he could be resigned to be fired, but he could kind of say, yes, I made a mistake, but here's where I tried to fix it. But no, he just kind of goes all in and then still waits around to get yelled at.
Right.
It's kind of a weird choice, but it works because obviously his character is not the priority there, but it's just because Scatman Crothers is such an interesting guy, it results in we kind of, the movie spends time with him beyond his probably real relevance to the story. And then of course Brad Dourif as Billy, is definitely, like, not to like diminish it at all, but like, it's a character is kind of designed to fulfill that role, right? Like, to garner our sympathy. Like, he's the the baby bird that needs to be sheltered and to be protected until he can grow up sort of character. Like for McMurphy to take him under his wing, so to speak.
Yep.
And the thing is too that like even though we see like even before Nurse Ratched turns it into a disaster, it seems like it has actually been a good thing for him to just randomly sleep with this girl. Like the truth is like it's probably of dubious like that. Like, is that really what's good for Billy? Maybe not.
No.
It's also a little weird that like what is this girl's relationship to McMurphy, and like why is it that she's okay with just randomly? It's like, sure, he's kind of cute, right? So go have sex with him. I'll wait.
I mean, I feel like she was kind of a prostitute.
Yeah.
That just happened to like hanging around him.
Yeah, maybe that's true. I mean, they never really make it clear, I guess. I mean, she certainly seems up for it. It's not like he had to force her or anything.
Right.
But I guess maybe it's just a matter of those characters never being entirely clear what their deal is.
Right.
I mean, obviously, yeah, and it's also in the 70s, so it's free love, all that.
Well, and she did know him from the boat trip. Like,
yeah.
there is part of that, scene where they do like interact and talk and
right.
friend.
Yeah, I guess it's just less common these days to have characters who are willing to have sex with someone as a favor to a third party.
Yes.
But yeah, you might be
that it should have happened or is common.
Yeah. Well, and also I think that the thing ultimately is like if we want to try to like, we can totally get McMurphy's kind of a screwed up guy in his own right, and we can see how from his perspective this is how he's helping. But we could also probably take a step back and say, if we wanted to kind of try to talk about what's really good for Billy, that's maybe a little too much to have him get drunk and then have sex with a prostitute in the middle of a crazy night in the hospital where he's gonna have to still stay in the morning.
Yeah.
It's like, well, and I guess McMurphy even says, like, come with me. And he says, I'm not ready. Right. So I think it's almost like a parting gift in that way. But, I don't know. It's in any event, I guess I'm not wanting to like criticize the decision so much as just like it's a recognition that as much as, he tried to help everybody, he was not necessarily going to be the best role model either. But it was just such a contrast to, the icy inhumanity of Nurse Ratched.
Yes.
And, and it's interesting to think about Nurse Ratched just too, in terms of like, you can just totally imagine that she has her own rationalizations about it. Like, she doesn't think she's a monster. Right? I think she occasionally has these flashes where she has to reassert control. And there's maybe even these impulses that would probably be hard to explain, except that she just rationalizes past them, right? So I think the stuff that she tells the doctors is probably also what she tells herself in those moments, right? There's a little bit of a denial aspect to her sadistic nature, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a really good movie. What did you have anything else you wanted to say about it, or?
Nope, covered all of my notes and thoughts.
Okay, so then let's talk about the list.
Tricky.
Yeah. So I could have pulled it up on the screen, but I'm not going to right now. So obviously, the AFI's list ranking has Snow White at number 34, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at 33. Those are certainly We're getting high up on the list. Of the movies we've talked about so far, the ones that I had the highest were Doctor Strangelove, Shawshank Redemption, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Amadeus. You have Bridge on the River Kwai, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Taxi Driver, and Jaws. Then the whole list. So, but there's just lots of really good movies here. It starts to become tricky to try to put them all in the right spot. Yeah. Do you have positions in mind?
I mean, I'm kind of winging it at this point.
Yeah.
I think both of these need to stay in the top 50 or 40 for me because they're just so important.
Yeah.
To what they did and are well done. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take Snow White and move it down to number 40, just after Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And the reason, because I think Lord of the Rings also did something new and different, and did it just a little bit better and bigger. So I want to keep it with that,
Yeah. All right. If I can actually select this stuff. I'm having difficulty moving things right now, but that's a good spot for it.
Yep. And then I'm not going to go too much farther down with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm going to go past Rocky and A Clockwork Orange.
Okay, sorry, I'm definitely having trouble just dragging stuff away from right now. Sorry.
I'm watching it on my iPad as you tinker around in there.
Yeah, well, like for some reason, like it's just scrolling weird and making it difficult for me to move stuff. Okay, well, Snow White you wanted after Lord of the Rings, and then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest where?
After A Clockwork Orange.
Okay.
So I'm keeping the genre launchers and the crazy people movies together that are also really good books that I enjoyed. Well, also Lord of the Rings too, but I like both Clockwork Orange and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
What is happening? Why is it doing that?
Whoa!
Yeah, it is literally like just the ordinary stuff of trying to click and drag cells around is just not cooperating right now. I don't know what the deal is. All right, well, let's see. Let me just try to do this maybe more manually.
Can I do it from here?
Okay, I can handle it. It's the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest after Doctor Strangelove.
Oh, you got it.
I think so.
I don't want it after Doctor
Strangelove. I'm doing it with copy and paste instead of
Clockwork Orange. Yeah.
What?
After Clockwork Orange, not Strangelove.
Yeah. Oh yes, you're right. Thank you. Okay. All right. I do not know what is happening with the drag because like I'm trying to drag it down one cell and it just won't drag one cell, but it will drag 50 cells. And yeah, so I don't know what that's all about, but
let me try it.
Okay, now I've got it. I've figured out what to do now.
I did it. There.
Okay, well, we're doing combo things now, which is
well, I had it, but now it's yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what? I think I will sort out the actual spreadsheet later. We don't have to have people listening to this. I will work it out. But in terms of this spreadsheet, but I don't know what's happening right now. But anyway, I think that I'm gonna put Snow White. I'm going to put it between King Kong and Bridge on the River Kwai. And then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I really like it, but I think I'm actually also going to put it after Clockwork Orange, which is relatively same location. So I guess technically speaking, it'll be like 47. Yeah. So in any event, yeah. So I'm going to put it One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest between Clockwork Orange and Rocky, and Snow White in between Bridge on the River Kwai and King Kong. So we both shifted it down a little bit.
Yeah, but still in the top 50. Yeah.
Right, but also still like pretty much all of them are going to kind of be like that as we each have our absolute favorite movies kind of bubble up to the top, right?
Yep.
It's going to shift almost everything else down. But in the meantime, I think that's going to cover it for this time. So our next two movies, whenever we manage to do it, are The Godfather Part 2 and The Maltese Falcon.
Yeah.
Which I'm super excited to rewatch The Maltese Falcon because I love it so much. Godfather Part 2, like you and I have had this conversation before. I remember way back when we did Hey, Want to Watch the Movie with The Godfather, and I just, for whatever reason, decided to be contrary and make fun of the movie. And you and some of the other people watching were a little bit annoyed with me. I think that like I can recognize the movies as being very good, but I don't necessarily hold them in the same sense of reverence as a lot of people do.
Wow. Yeah. Godfather Part 2 is amazing.
It's a very good movie. I just am less interested in the mob stories than, I guess they don't resonate as much with me as they do with some people, which is fine. I can certainly attest and agree with the quality of the filmmaking for sure. And I don't know, maybe when I rewatch it, I'll like it more than I remember.
Yeah. Well, let's try to do those sometime this summer.
Yeah, I agree. I would just, I'm very happy with the plan of trying to do them sooner rather than later. So we'll try to work that out. And in the meantime, everybody, watch good movies.
Yay.